Welcome to this episode of Health Reversion. You're here with Adrian, and in this episode, we're going to be having a look at mono-eating. Have you tried mono-eating? Is this something that you incorporate into your daily practice already? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd be very interested to hear. The term mono, if you didn't already know, means single or one. Therefore, in respect to mono-eating, the most extreme version would be to have just one particular food at any given setting. So for example, let's take morning tea. If you're a bit of a fruit person, you would exclusively have that one type of fruit at that particular sitting. So if it was apples, you'd have 1, 2, 3 apples, however many it takes to satisfy your appetite, and you would keep it just to apples. The notion behind mono-eating is to make it as easy and efficient as possible for the digestive system to recognize the particular food that you are eating so it can be digested and assimilated to its maximum capability. So by having the one food at a time, the body is able to determine the specific enzymes that are required and which path it's going to take once the food is swallowed. Now, out of the macronutrients, which we will cover in depth today, being carbohydrates, protein, and fat, there's a special mention for protein. And the reason there's a special mention is because out of the macronutrients, it is the most difficult and time-consuming and energy-consuming out of all of the macronutrients. So protein is going to draw upon that much more energy in order for it to be broken down and assimilated by your body. Now, to be clear, mono-eating might not be something that you would do every day because it can be quite restrictive. Perhaps you're feeling a bit run down. Maybe you've got a lot on in the next couple of days in terms of a work project. Maybe you have a big family event coming. So where mono-eating could be incorporated, in that case on a daily basis and perhaps for most of the day, would be where you need that extra energy. You need to draw upon your energy reserves in order to fulfill that task, whether that's that big family event, big work deadline that you've got to meet with reports and presentations and what have you. Another time that you might want to incorporate mono-eating is maybe before you start traveling, just to ensure that the body is given maximum energy in those days leading up where you're packing and you've got a lot on your mind and maybe you've got to tidy up around the house, etc. When considering the digestive system, there is a golden rule of thumb that you potentially have already heard about, which is to not combine starches and protein. But in our wonderful inverted society that we live in, where lots of games and funny business are played, unfortunately, this is exactly the type of combination that so many of our favoured foods and restaurant and takeaway foods actually present to us. For example, a burger, we all love them, or maybe not all of us, but most of us love them. But you've got that combination of starch being the bun and the burger patty, which is going to be either meat, which is the protein, or it could be a vegetable patty in that case, which will also contain lots of vegetable protein. And those two combinations can make it really difficult for the body to digest. It doesn't mean it can't digest it efficiently. There's plenty of people that can have 1, 2, 3 burgers and they're fine. But over time, if we're having these less than ideal food combinations that are putting a strain on our body, later on down the track, it could be a couple of years, could be 10 years, 20 years, eventually the digestive system might be saying, okay, we've had enough of just being neglected here. We operate best by having one single food at a time, and you're continuously giving us these combinations of starches and protein, and we've had enough. So let's look at some strategies to not burden the digestive system, to not draw upon the natural energy reserves that you have during the day that you could use to go for a walk, go hiking, spend time with friends, instead of it being drawn upon to digest all of these less than ideal food combinations that put strain on the digestive system, chew up far more digestive enzymes and put pressure on those organs responsible for producing the enzymes, such as the pancreas and the liver. Under normal circumstances where you're healthy, you've got really high levels of energy, and these food combinations don't bother you, great, you can definitely keep eating that way. But even if you are not experiencing any issues with the foods that you're eating, trialing some of the strategies that are coming up may help to let you achieve even greater levels of energy. So let's begin with breakfast. Break fast. So the first meal of the day where we're breaking that fast. If you're someone that prefers a carbohydrate-based breakfast, so if you're into your fruit or your cereals or grains, so let's say that you like to have oats for breakfast. In order to incorporate the mono eating, you would just simply have the oats on their own. Now that doesn't mean that you can't have any condiments. As long as the condiments are things like sugar, coconut sugar, honey, as long as they're from the same macronutrient group, so in this case you've got oats, which are a carbohydrate, and if you were to use honey, both carbohydrates, then that's okay. You've got that one macronutrient group. The taste buds are going to recognize that. The digestion process is actually going to start in your mouth, and then once it travels down, it will take a certain pathway, and those carbohydrates have the best opportunity to effortlessly find their way back into the storage compartments known as glycogen and be used as energy in the body. If you're needing something a little bit more substantial for breakfast, such as bacon and eggs, or steak and eggs, sausages and eggs, then only have those particular foods. So if you're having steak and eggs for breakfast, if that's something that's a bit more suited to you, then we need to avoid having the toast. We need to avoid going too heavy on any of the nice sauces. I know they're good, you know, barbecue sauce, chipotle sauce, all those sauces are wonderful, I get that. But from a mono eating perspective, when we're combining lots of that onto the meat, we're adding carbohydrates in there, and potentially there's not going to be any issue, so you can trial it, but if there is, you might find a little bit of fermentation, which can be quite undesirable. And again, the digestive enzymes are going to get a little bit diluted with all those additional sources. And just one final note on breakfast. You might say to me, Adrian, I really love my cereal and fruit, or my oats and fruit, or I'm a big quinoa person and I love to have my quinoa and then put a whole bunch of blueberries on top. And if that works, if that's not leading to any energy discrepancies, 20 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour later, then great, you can keep doing that. But just know that fruit has a very exclusive manner with which it's digested by the body, and it doesn't take the usual pathways. So it actually bypasses the stomach and goes straight to the small intestine, whereas the grains will still need to spend some time in the stomach being broken down. So essentially, even though it's true, they're both from the carbohydrate macronutrient group, the combination of the two, from a mono eating perspective and from high energy level perspectives, isn't always something that would be the best suggestion. Now, dinner. With dinner, perhaps you've had a really productive day and you've done all of your tasks and you've got plenty of energy left, and you're like, you know what, I've done that mono eating all day, I just want to relax and unwind and have my favorite meal, which might be a less than ideal combination, such as, fish and pasta or chicken and rice. Maybe you're going to cook a spaghetti bolognese. And really, if you're feeling quite energetic, the stress levels have come down, you're at home, you're relaxed, then potentially your digestive system would be able to quite easily handle that sort of meal. in a nice relaxed environment. But if you've had a big day or you've got something big on tomorrow and you want to make sure that you have an extra good sleep, you've got all those energy reserves to draw upon, then you'd still apply the mono eating concept at dinner. So for example, if you like something light and you've cooked yourself, say a vegetable soup, then again, just keeping the vegetable soup, and maybe you might think, oh, I'd like to have some bread with that, or have some rice. But look, if you can, from a mono eating perspective, that is, having the soup initially, and then giving it some time, and then having the carbohydrates after. Let's say you're having chicken and rice. Again, having the chicken first and separating that, and then having the carbohydrate or the rice later. Let's say you're having steak and potatoes. Again, starting with the steak and then following it up later with the potatoes. Now, there's no rule of thumb of how long you have to wait. You could have the steak and then the potatoes straight after. But the point of doing this is to have the most burdensome macronutrient, so the one that requires the most energy, the most enzymes, and can benefit from sitting in that hydrochloric acid for that little bit longer on its own, would be the protein component. So by having that first, it goes down and it experiences the highest levels of hydrochloric acid, it experiences the highest levels of digestive enzymes, and hopefully your body is able to break that down so that it can be utilized. And then a little while later, it might be half an hour, a couple of hours later, you might decide to follow it up with that bowl of potatoes, a bowl of rice, anything else carbohydrate based that you'd like to have. A little caution on fruit there, because it does take several hours, depending on the individual, for the heavier stuff like meat or tofu to pass through the system. So having fruit afterwards would probably lead to that word again, that F word, fermentation, which can be a little bit undesirable for many people. It might look to an interrupted sleep there as well, because the fruit's just going to sit on top of the other food in there and it can't quite get to its destination because it's kind of being blocked. So if you are going to have fruit for dessert, make sure that there's several hours of space there before you decide to have that. So in summary, this concept of mono eating, while it has really beneficial energy production benefits and can keep you at your best throughout the day and possibly over the course of a few days, we have to face the facts here that it's not practical all the time, and particularly in a social setting. The last thing you want to do is arrive at a cafe or a restaurant with a group of friends and there's all these wonderful things on the menu and they're asking you, oh, why aren't you getting stuck into that? And you're like, oh, I'm trying to keep a mono eating, and then you have to explain what mono eating is potentially. So to counter that, or as a strategy, the 80-20 rule could be applied. I'm sure you've heard of the 80-20 rule, but if you haven't, it's doing something, for instance, mono eating, 80% of the week, and then leaving 20% for some treats or some social settings, or that, 1 or 2 dinners a week that you want to relax with. So, as always, you're going to have to experiment on yourself. You might find that just eating all day on the single food items gives you the most, and you get so much more out of your days that you're like, I'm going to keep the food combinations to even less than 20%. I'm going to keep it at 10% or 5%, or only when I go out in social settings. So play around with it and let me know how you go in the comments. I'd really like to hear about it. Thank you for watching to the end of this video. If you didn't get anything out of this video, please give it a thumbs down so I can get that feedback. If you did get something out of this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. As always, I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and keep well.